Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. Live here on AMP right after Thursday Night Football. The Eagles get an impressive win against the Minnesota Vikings. We will dive into that game, all different angles. The Eagles, their new play caller, some positives and negatives, something I saw from the Minnesota Vikings. We will touch on the broadcast. Something really jumped out to be about Al Michaels, which I think it parallels a former legendary broadcaster from a couple years ago. And then we will also hit on a couple other quick points leading into the big slate of games come Sunday. But first, this is 3 and Out Podcast. Me, John Middlekauff. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen. Apple, Spotify, we got you covered. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hammer that like button, leave a comment, interact with our content, and subscribe to the page. We got content every day, pumping them out. We will not leave you wanting more because we're bringing it. And I don't have it on right now, but we have a lot of merch. Thevolume.com. Search our hats. 3 and Out. We got flex fit hats, trucker hats. Got you covered. And yeah, football's back, baby. We're already in week 2. Let's have a good time. But first, you know what I got to tell you. Do you live in Philadelphia? Do you want to watch your Birds try to go back on another Super Bowl run? Well, here's what you do. You go to Gametime. You go to your app store, and then you look for the Gametime app. And when you download the Gametime app, you use the promo code JOHN for your first pair of tickets. Football games, baseball games, concerts. You want to be a Swiftie like Travis Kelce? Go to Gametime. Type in the promo code JOHN. That's JOHN. Get $20 off. In these inflationary times, a discount? Are you kidding me? $20 off your first pair of tickets. Search anything. Comedy, concerts. They have interactive maps. They tell you the price points where you want to sit. Very, very easy to use. First pair of tickets. Again, promo code JOHN. JOHN. $20 off. Gametime. Official ticketing app of this podcast. Okay, Thursday Night Football is back on Amazon Prime. And we'll dive into the broadcast in a little bit. But let's focus on the actual football game. Start with the Eagles because they're clearly in the group, which is the Niners and the Cowboys as the top tier of the NFC. I don't see any way that one of those 3 teams does not win the conference. And the Eagles have basically the exact same team back, right? Offense, same dudes. Defense, lost a guy, but also added the best player in the draft at the same position. But they have 2 new coordinators. And let's start with their offensive coordinator. If I went to the grocery store right now and shopped for any type meal and got 2 of each ingredient, and I cooked the meal and Gordon Ramsay cooked the meal, one meal would taste dramatically better, right? We'd all agree with that. Well, it's no different with offensive play calling. You can have the same exact players, Montana, Rice, Moss, Marvin Harrison. I don't care who it is. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts. And it's going to look different depending on the guy calling the plays. I think a lot of times when we talk about the draft and scouting, it's very, very hard it's easy to put, tangible results on the 40, a height, a weight, any sort of movement drill around cones, right? Short, subtle. It's very, very hard to gauge because you can't quantify intangibles, instincts, football character. I think it's very similar with coaches. I talked to a buddy today in the league. He's like, the hard part is a guy can be an elite position coach on offense or defense, be what many considered when they're around him. This might be the best position coach in the NFL. But those talents and those characteristics that make you a good position coach don't necessarily translate to being a good coordinator and being a good play caller. Now, I'm a big believer in you improve and gain confidence through experience. The more you do something, the better you get. But when you take over a job like the Eagle job, there's a ton of pressure, right? They clearly were one of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL. Their play caller was probably one of the most sought after. coordinators in recent memory. He was elite at his job. He had a great feel for it. And I think when you watch the Vikings, like Kevin O'Connell, I see where he's cut from that McVay, Shanahan, LaFleur. He has a good feel for play calling. There is a rhythm to everything you do. Now you're like, John, what are you talking about? Look at their offensive numbers tonight. Tonight got easy because after a couple drives, when their passing game was stalling out and looking a little similar to last week, no rhythm, no just feel for it, they started running the ball. And because you're playing the Vikings, whose defensive personnel, despite having a good defensive coordinator, and what do we always say? I don't care how good your defensive coordinator is. If you do not have players on defense, it's hard to have a good defense. It's not offense. Offense, you can scheme average guys and have an explosive offense. Defense is not the case. You need some horses. It's why 4 or 5 years ago, when Minnesota had all those guys in their prime, they were awesome on defense. Those guys, many of them long gone or long in the tooth. It clearly isn't the same. And the Eagles, who have an elite offensive line, ran the ball down their throat. But ultimately, to win the NFC and to get the number 1 seed, because clearly that's going to be a really, really big deal this year, just like it was last year. Them having the number 1 seed, having that game in Philadelphia was huge. You got to pass, right? And you have to timely pass. And you saw tonight, I don't think A.J. Brown was just bitching and moaning on the sideline for no reason. Like you saw last year, and you even saw times in Tennessee when he played for, like, he knows what good offensive coordination looks like. He knows what a well-run passing game looks like. And I think right now, despite Jalen's numbers don't look terrible, but it's not passing the eye test. And I think every Eagles fan, and I know Al and those guys were talking about, they're just being negative to be negative. No, I think they know what a good passing offense looks like, and something's off right now. They're going to be able to run it against 90% of their opponents. And when I say run it, like all game long, like all you have to call is run plays, and you will probably win the game. I bet if we pulled up their schedule, the majority of opponents, they can run it right down their throat. I'll tell you a couple teams they won't be able to do. The Cowboys play twice. They play the 49ers. Like, you're not just going to be able to run for 700 yards against them. So there's going to have to be some rhythm and timing with the pass offense. And right now it feels like Brian Johnson and Jalen, something with his confidence. Maybe it's because he didn't get any reps. I know Sirianni talked about that in the preseason. It just looks a little different than last year. And one thing is very, very evident is when he runs anywhere between the tackles and he can't get to the sideline, he's just not the same guy. And not because he doesn't have the physical skills. It's because clearly they've coached him up and he's thought about it and they've talked about it, and he's not wrong. They're paying me a ton of money. Our success is predicated on, me staying healthy. I got to be careful. And it's true. Well, if that's the case, don't call quarterback powers because he's not running like he used to do. So that's a throwaway play. And early on in that game, that's what Brian Johnson was calling. So I would say the one major question I have about this team is not the players. Roster loaded. Star players, corner, D-line, line, run. I mean, hell, their running backs are good, let alone star tight ends, star wide receivers, highly paid quarterback. It's the coaching. And because their head coach is a CEO head coach, despite being like 41 years old, you're very predicated on these two new coordinators. And defensively, like one thing really jumps out is they lost Javon Hargrave because they couldn't pay him, and he goes to the 49ers, and he's a stud, and they easily replaced him. Jalen Carter made a play today. Now, the Vikings offensive line isn't exactly the 93 Cowboys unit, but he made them look like it was me at Davis High School in 2003. His stance wasn't even that athletic. Like Fletcher Cox looks like he's about to run, like be a sprinter. Like he's in this athletic stance, ready to be shot out like a rocket. Jalen Carter just kind of leaned over. I'm like, how's he going to explode out of this? Within one step, he was already in the backfield. I was like, holy cannoli. Jordan Davis had a play today where he hit Kirk Cousins, and these guys are so coached up now, they know that if you hit the guy or land on the guy, you get a penalty. So he's so athletic, he's able to kind of pull up, but he still hit him. Cousins flew like 7 yards in the air. I mean, those two guys are freakazoids. Clearly the Eagles, the best decision they ever made is the year after the Rager pick where they're like, we need to stop outthinking the room. Let's just take dudes from Bama and Georgia. And those guys make plays everywhere. So the talent on the Eagles clearly is never going to be their issue. This team, Howie Roseman has built a bully. They are loaded all over the place. The only question I have, and we're only truly going to find this out when it matters in the big games against the Niners and the Cowboys and then the playoffs, is the coaching. and the schematics, and mainly on offense. Defensively, even if like they have a bad play call here and there, they have enough good players to make do. It's just going to be the offensive coordinator. And right now, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bet the farm on them, but they might just be talented enough to get away with. But it's something to definitely keep an eye on. And then Minnesota, clearly their run and their era is kind of over. They band-aided a little bit last year with, all the one-score games and winning the craziness and winning 13 games. And clearly they were one and done in the playoffs. It's pretty clear this offseason that, the Cousins era is about to end. I mean, they were entertaining trading him this offseason. They couldn't really find a spot. They have not talked extension. It feels like they'll just let him walk and maybe draft a guy and kind of start the clock over, kind of redo their books. I do think that Cousins has taken a lot of shit, and some of it is self-inflicted, but we all watch a lot of football, especially if you listen to this podcast. He's probably not as bad as we've all said over the years. One disservice Minnesota has really done to him, and I went to the playoff game in 19 against the 49ers. That was the year. It was the second round. They had beat the Saints in the first round. Their offensive line has been consistently shitty. And when you have a terrible offensive line with an immobile pocket quarterback, like you're going to be limited. And then your defense is just not any good. You're going to have major problems. Because I think their coach, we talk about Brian Johnson, like just watch the way, and it's easier sometimes to have a rhythm in the McVay-Shanahan scheme, right? Running the outside zones, the inside zones, the play actions, the boots. There's a rhythm to that play calling that they all kind of have. I think he has it. Like I was really, really impressed with him. Obviously, you have Justin Jefferson, who feels like, I don't know, like in his prime, like Randy Moss, Chris Carter. Like you all know the ball's going to him. Everyone in the stadium knows it. Everyone on the Eagles knows it. And you look up, he's got 10, 11 catches for 140 yards. Like he's just an unstoppable force. He's fun to watch. And I enjoy watching Minnesota's offense. I don't know when the dust settles, what happens with Cousins next year. Does some team sign him to some 2-year deal? But it does feel like this is a swan song in Minnesota. And honestly, they paid him a lot, so it's not like he got screwed, but they let him down a little bit from the personnel standpoint with and I know they lost some offensive linemen tonight from injuries, but you can't have a mediocre to below average offensive line with a quarterback that can't move. Unless you have, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady sometimes because of the coaching, and they're some of the greatest quarterbacks and greatest athletes of all time at their sport. That's not Cousins, but Cousins is good enough where you should be better than you are. And honestly, their offense clearly tonight was not their problem. But sometimes I think, are we just too harsh on them? I've definitely come around on Jared Goff. Like some of these guys, like not everyone's Mahomes, right? Not everyone's Trevor Lawrence. Some guys, like being the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th best quarterback, like you got a pretty good player. Like you can win with that guy. It's on the organization. And last but not least on Thursday Night Football is the broadcast is awful. It really is. Let me say this. Let me preface this whole conversation by I think Al Michaels is a legend. There are several guys that I've grown up with, and they were older even when I was growing up, that I view as legends in terms of calling my games, right? Obviously the Madden and Summerall. I'd put Al Michaels, I'd put Musburger, I'd put Marv Albert. But a couple years ago, I remember watching Marv Albert on TNT. Now, they had him with Chris Webber. It was just a terrible broadcast. But Marv was slipping. And the NBA, you're sitting courtside. There's only 10 guys on the court. The majority of the games Marv's calling are with the most famous players in the NBA. The Currys, the Durants, the LeBrons. I could call it in terms of know their names, and Marv didn't know the names. And Marv didn't really know what was going on. He was calling twos when it was threes and threes when it was twos. It was clear he was shot, which was understandable. He was almost 80 years old. And there comes a point where sometimes at 38 years old, I'm like, is my mind as sharp? Like, where are my thoughts? Where are my memories? And I'm not even 40. I can't imagine being that close. Now, listen, we've all been around people. Some people are just dumb, and some people are sharp as a tack till they die at 92. So you can't judge a book by its cover in terms of its age, right? So just because you're older doesn't mean you're not sharp. But Al's slipping. He called tonight Veterans Stadium. Obviously, the Eagles have played at Lincoln Financial for almost 2 decades now. I think I had a buddy send me a picture of the of Veterans Stadium being blown up in 2004. I think they opened this stadium in 2002 Could be wrong, 01, 02, 03 range. Called it Veteran Stadium. But that's not, listen, we all make mistakes. I say stupid things all the time. Last year, he took a lot of shit for just being kind of boring. I think he's just lost his fastball. And like I said, I'm not some hater of Al Michaels. I think he's one of, if not the greatest guy to ever be behind a mic calling sporting events. But it's over. And him and Herb Street have about as much chemistry as like me and this desk. I mean, there's just nothing there. Like it ain't working. It's just, and I was harsh last year. And even though I understood Lynch turned them down, McVay turned them down, they went after some high, famous NFL guys. They couldn't land anyone. They were somewhat desperate. This ain't working though. And I understand from a name recognition who ultimately, like, is it really that big a deal? In the short term, probably not, but I don't think you can keep rolling Al at this point. And I would imagine eventually TNT, I bet if we Googled it or just know the inside information, like they told Marv, no mas, it's over. Someone has to tell Al, like, this thing's over. 79 years old, had an incredible run. Go play Bel Air Country Club every day. Have a good life. But you, a microphone, and the National Football League, like, we can't do this anymore. And I'm not just saying this to try to talk shit. I had countless people from the NFL texting me like, this is awful. I thought it was pretty bad. And I tend to like him, right? I've always thought the Herb Street thing never made any sense, but this is it's just a bad broadcast. It really is. Now, they're not alone. There are a lot of bad broadcasts, the 6th, 7th crew on some of these networks, but this is Al Michaels. And I thought the same thing with Marv Albert at the end. Like, it's hard. No one wants to watch Willie Mays on the Mets. No one wants to do that. No one wants to this isn't how it should end, even though for most human beings that are really famous and really great at their job, it usually ends ugly, and that's how it feels like it's ending here. Football is back in full swing with another week of epic games. And who's got you covered on the action for every single one of them? DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 on football and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Nobody's missing out on the action this season. All DraftKings customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Get in on the NFL Week 2 action with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the app now and use the code JOHN, John, to sign up. New customers can bet $5 and take home $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Okay, a couple quick things that I wrote down about some quarterbacks. I did a little digging, aka I just went to his Wikipedia page, and I saw that since they've traded for Russell Wilson, and it's not all his fault, though I would put the pie chart, pretty large percentage is in his category, given that they're paying him a ton of money. They traded the farm for him, and I don't know, he was a Hall of Fame player. He's not 40 years old, right? He's in his early to mid 30s. I think he's 33, 34 years old. They're 4-12 with him as a starter, if you count last week. Well, like, something's got to give. Like, are they ever going to start winning games? Like, even last week, played a little bit better. His yards per attempt were so low. Something's off. And it's hard, like, a guy that's washed, to me, is someone that can't move. You see it a lot at other positions. When I was working with the Eagles on that dream team, we signed Ronnie Brown. Remember, him and Cadillac Williams, famous backfield, Auburn. He went to Miami, was a really, really good NFL running back. I remember, like, the second day of practice, and I don't pretend at the time to be like Bill Polian, but I had a pretty good idea of what worked in the NFL, what doesn't. He was so slow. I'm like, his legs are shot. And he was. It was over. I remember, Nnamdi Asomugha. Like, some guys, you just get them, and either physically they're broken down, they just don't have it anymore. But you just watch Russell last week. Like, he moved okay, but he's just not really a winning player. And when I say a winning player, like, guys like him used to force you and drag you to wins. I mean, we saw for a couple year stretch, once that defense kind of fell off, he just would find a way to get his team to a 10 or 11 wins when they had no business. They had no pass rush. Their offensive line was shitty. They had a couple receivers, and that was it. And that guy's long gone. And that guy now, if you have a flawed team, which clearly Denver does, though they have a good coach, he's just a losing player. And he's really got to figure it out. And this notion that, like, and I understand why people are saying it, Sean Payton, his personality, he won't deal with this long. I just don't really see their options. What are they going to do? Bench him for Jared Stidham? Okay, they can do that. It's not like you can trade him or cut him. You're still stuck with a guy. So Russell just needs to find a way to drag this team to some wins and do it fast. I was thinking about this because, listen, I've been fired twice, in my late 20s and early 30s, and it is, even if you're ready to move on or you realize like, God, I don't even want to be there, or it wasn't working out and you knew it, it's still there's a shot to your pride. There's a shot to your ego. Any ambitious person doesn't like, no human being likes to fail. I'd say that's like a human, reaction. Anytime someone tells you you're not good enough, it's hard. No matter how much you can look in the mirror and accept the reality of whatever that situation is. But I do think second chances are really powerful. And I think a big reason second chances are so powerful is because you have that experience to build on, right? Like my radio career. Now, again, I was working for the second-rate radio that wasn't generating any money. The station had some issues, right? We were going up against a brand that has the San Francisco Giants and the 49ers, and it was very difficult. But there were things that I did in terms of this business, and Colin said it the other night, a huge part of this business is revenue. And a huge part of the revenue comes from the salespeople. And I've spent a lot of time getting to know salespeople, whether it's at iHeart or people that deal with the podcast. They are the lifeblood. Like Deion says, recruiting, all these college coaches recruiting, the lifeblood in my business is sales and selling revenue. And you can only go as far. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gone through previous experiences, because I'm not some guy that grew up in the radio business in my 20s. I was working in football. And Zach Wilson last year was an utter disaster. And a lot of it was self-inflicted, right? He played poorly. A lot of guys have in the history of the sport. Welcome to the club, right? But when he wouldn't take blame, when he was saying things that were clearly pissing off his teammates, like, come on, man, you got to have some common sense. So you get a guy now who I don't know how much better he is, but some guys improve. Now, I'm not acting like he's going to show up and be Aaron Rodgers, but if he has any sort of EQ and just feel for the room and just has done some self-reflection over the last 6-8 months when they traded for Rodgers and he kind of got to sit back and take second team reps, he can really learn from that experience and that can help him moving forward. Now, does that translate? Ultimately in football, you got to be able to complete deep outs. You got to have touch on the wheel route when you're getting pressure. Like there is a level of all that intangible stuff. You got to get it done on the field, which was very alarming last year, just some of his basic passes, air mailing balls in the flat. But in terms of the person, he's getting a second chance. Now, no one, trust me, whether you're a Jets fan or not, no one wanted this to happen. We wanted to watch Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is currently in a hospital bed with a ripped Achilles. So this guy who saw, it couldn't have gone any worse last year. If he can't take some of those lessons that he learned through just, adversity, which, like I said, self-inflicted a decent amount of it, then that's on him, because he's been given a second chance now on a team that's pretty freaking good, even better than last year. Like their defense should be better, and offensively they've added a running back. Garrett Wilson's a year better. So I'm very interested to watch how this plays out. Another guy in my backyard, the Giants are playing the Cardinals this week, who, I was pretty confident the Cardinals would give up a decent fight on the road against Washington. Didn't quite win it, but that was my bold take, which we'll get into in a second. Daniel Jones, I defended, I guess, to a level with the contract, and just they were kind of stuck, though they probably could have gone about it a different way. Regardless, they paid him what they paid. The dude's making $40 million a year, and he threw 15 touchdowns last year. And before last year started, he was basically universally considered a bust and a bad player. Last week was bad, right? Wasn't all his fault. The whole thing, they got boat raced, but he was not good either. He was actually atrocious. Now he's playing the Cardinals. And next Thursday night is the Niner game. So they're going to be a huge underdog, probably lose. He better find a way to play well this week, because if he doesn't, even if they win and then they get their ass kicked by the Niners, I lived in the Northeast for a couple years. There's like a negativity that's almost like an avalanche, that it starts coming, and then once it grows, kind of like that snowball rolling down the hill effect. It gets so big, there's no stopping it. And I could see it getting away from the Giants a little bit on Daniel Jones. It would be, if I'm Brian Daboll, I find a way. We can get Saquon going, whatever. Like, I need to get him like 3 or 4 touchdowns this week against Arizona. This is a team that we all think's going to be dog shit. Their coaching staff's not that great. Definitely their players aren't that great. Daniel Jones needs a big game. And last but not least, eventually this guy's got to draw a line in the sand. You know, he's either got to make some plays in the passing game, or we just got to acknowledge he just might not be that good. Like, I could say Josh Allen, like after that game, like let's say Josh Allen have a bad month before we all write the guy off. Resume speaks for itself. But Justin Fields is just your classic. People anointed him. People thought he was going to be sweet. And it's just not. Even last year when it wasn't going well, I have no problem, and I'll always do this. If I like a guy, I'll be excited for him and I'll root for him. But after a couple of years, like you eventually, that's the thing with the football. You eventually got to make some plays, right? I say this all the time in the stock market. You can invest 10 grand into a stock you like. If 6 months later, that thing's $3,000, you got some problems. It might be time to reevaluate some stuff, right? And positive momentum is important in any walk of life. And right now, Justin Fields has no positive momentum. The only positive momentum he's ever had is the offseason when there's no substance behind it. It's just coaches kind of talking. And he plays the Packers, and he looked terrible. He threw for under 6 yards an attempt in a game where they were losing the majority of the game. So I just think they're playing Todd Bowles, who had that team flying around last week on the road. Is this guy just going to be, essentially a bust? Or is he ever just going to make some plays? Because right now the Bears have some serious issues. And I'm just, for a game that if you told me a couple weeks ago, Bears, Bucks, I'd be like, I got no interest in watching this. I got some interest, and I'm going to be paying attention for sure. Let's get to our Guinness bold take of the week. That's a good beer. Okay. Here's the deal. And I've talked myself into this. Last week, and I'm not going to do this every week just to do it, but early on, I'm going to, because I think the season is weird. I took the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are terrible. I just took them on principle of week one's weird. Anything can happen. These coaches, whatever. I'm going to take the Jets this week against the Cowboys. And I thought a lot about this during the day on Thursday. If Aaron Rodgers was healthy and this was just a normal game, right? The Jets had won, the Cowboys had won. You would take the Cowboys would win this game at home. I would say 8.5 out of 10 times. They would win this game the majority of the times. But think about this. They destroy the Giants, right? So you just naturally feel yourself a little bit. And then the guy that they would have, even after an ass kicking that would have kind of refocused them, would have been, hey, we're playing Aaron Rodgers. He tears his Achilles, so he's long gone. And then you're getting Zach Wilson, who just, if you just say Zach Wilson to the average football fan, they'd be like, God, he sucks. What a bust. We're humans. Football is full of a bunch of humans. And these are young humans, right? These are guys, especially the Cowboys, majority of their guys, 23 to like 27 years old. You're playing an elite defense. Dak, he hasn't proven he's just rolling again. I could just see the focus being a little off, especially with their defense, because Aaron's gone. It happens all the time with, like, I've seen the Niners do this, the Cowboys, the Eagles. When you have like a 13, 14 win team in December, you're playing some team that's going to be drafting in like top 6 or 7. All of a sudden you look up and that team has a lead in the fourth quarter because those guys didn't take the week seriously. It's hard to coach. Now, it's still early in the season, so I'm not acting like Dallas is going to airmail or just, throw this thing to the side and not even try. But I could see the focus this week just being a little off, given that Aaron's gone, and maybe a little upset. So that's my bold pick of the week. Jets going to Dallas, upset them. Brought to you by Guinness. Gather your friends, raise your glasses, and toast a win. Guinness Stout, imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York. Please drink responsibly.